An African proverb says, if you educate a boy, you educate an individual. If you educate a girl, you educate a nation. But challenges exist for both girls and boys in sub-Saharan Africa, where the rate of education exclusion are high. According to UNESCO, 9 million girls and 6 million boys between the ages of about 6 and 11 will never go to school at all. And almost 60% of youth between the ages of 15 and 17 are also not in school. Poverty is the biggest factor that determines whether or not children can get an education. Today on Our Voices, our focus is greater access to education on the African continent. We also take a look at the challenges and opportunities for teachers. Hello, I'm Orion Itangishaka.
And hi, I'm Ayan Bior.
And I am Hadiza Kiari.
Hello there, I'm Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick. At least half of girls in Malawi don't finish high school, many because of marriage. Memory Mdetseni resisted pressure to marry at age 15. Now she's running a school that provides girls with a free education. Mdetseni says her mission is to give every girl a chance. VOA's Lamek Messina visited her school outside the capital, Lilongwe.
Atsikana Paulendo, or Girls on the Move Secondary School, is a symbol of hope for girls from poor families.
My parents could not afford to pay my school fees to any other secondary school because they're poor and don't work. They're only peasant farmers who don't earn enough from farming.
Emily is among several girls who are learning here for free. The school is a brainchild of Memory Chazeza Metetieni, who resisted a push into marriage from her relatives after the death of her parents.
They never came direct to me like Memory, you're supposed to get married, but their talks, their chats around me was really leading to telling me that I should get married. And all the time, I was able to stand up for myself to say no.
But 3 years later, she lost an uncle who was paying for her secondary education, and she left school to stay with her grandfather.
I was the only girl in the village. And when I asked about the other girls where they were, I was told they are all married. And in this small village, the expectation was that I was the next person to get married.
Instead, she began working as a volunteer teacher at an all-girls secondary school, which had just opened in her area. Here, she became friends with a volunteer teacher from Canada who later raised funds for Metetieni's college education. After obtaining a degree in Bible studies, Metetieni shared with her Canadian benefactor, Christy Johnson, the idea of starting the all-girls secondary school.
It's such a huge achievement to a girl child. When you look at a girl child without an education, then you look at her that once she comes to this school, there's that chance that she is going to make it.
The school gets most of its funding from Rotary clubs in Canada, where Johnson lives. More than 800 girls have so far benefited from the scholarships since they began in 2007. Some are now working as teachers, while others have graduated from universities.
If I do not have APU there for me, it means that by now I would be home in the village, married, having kids, and just a housewife, and a housewife, of course, of a subsistence farmer, and I do not like that.
A graduate of economics from the University of Oklahoma in the U.S., Samuel plans to start an economic empowerment initiative that will help give employment to people in her village. Financial challenges have forced the school to enroll other students who pay tuition fees. Still, Metetieni plans to open a few more schools operating under the same model and even dreams of opening colleges for the benefit of girls. Gwen Uten for Lamek Messina, VOA News.
You know, I'm so glad that Lamek actually went to visit this school, because to me it is an example of what happens when in a small African country, which is relatively poor, when we actually do things right and what that can look like. You know, Malawi has been a little bit ahead of its time. In 1994, it actually eliminated primary school fees for children. And so kids were coming to school in large numbers. They really saw an explosion in enrollment. Problem is, kids were coming into a system that was sort of already broken, into existing infrastructure, into existing school buildings, you know, and so you had these large classroom sizes, you know, there were not enough learning materials. Teachers who were already overburdened had to accept all these new incoming students. And so that led to poor student performance. And so I think as we're looking to bring more girls into the education system as well, we really should not just focus on access to education, but what we're giving them access to.
Yeah, that's true, Heidi. I also think that when we're looking at enrollment and increasing enrollment, we've seen that over the years we should really look at the progress we've made and build on it. I mean, the Millennium Development Goals of 2015 really did emphasize on enrollment. And we've seen in countries like in Burundi, where, you know, as you said, Malawi is impoverished and Burundi has its definite economic issues. But it was one of the countries that was, you know, on top of the list of countries with greatest strides in enrollment. UNICEF said that 59% in 2005 increased to 96% in 2011 in terms of enrollment. And on the continent's level, since 1999, we've seen a 75% increase until 2015 for enrollment. So we know that enrollment has been really developing, has been really great on the continent. I think we should just build and see the retention level.
Yeah,
what do we have in terms of retention?
So much attention focused on enrollment.
Right, we do have enrollment and it has been proven. So retention is what we really need to focus on, and especially during puberty for young girls, because, you know, UN really recognized, and even recently in Geneva, they've really recognized that they really have to put focus in retention in terms of girls being provided sanitary pads and things that they need, sanitary towels, and just making sure that the poverty and as well as pregnancy rate is not keeping girls out of school, because they've really acknowledged that 20% of the time is missed by girls because of the menstrual cycles. And so I think that if we focus there, retention can really improve.
Right, imagine 20%. I mean, these are some of the basic challenges that our public school systems really need to address. And also, to your point, Haiti, structural challenges. Right. Just like Malawi, both Uganda and Kenya also have free public primary school. But the issue is they didn't address some of these structural issues: lack of teachers, lack of public buildings for this influx of students to learn in. And Kenya has made headlines for their primary education, their free primary education. But if you think about it, at the end of the day, there are non-tuition related fees that families have to think about. The cost of uniforms, transportation to and from school, and in some cases, examination fees. And Kenya is a country where 35% of the population lives below the poverty line. So if you're making less than $2 a day, all of a sudden, a school uniform is a huge burden.
Well, if you look at all the sacrifices that these families are making, I mean, it is so heartbreaking to see that when kids do get to school, the quality of education is so poor. And I think we really need to look at the education we're giving our children, whether it sets them up for success. It doesn't just have advantages for them now, but advantages for them in adulthood, so that they can become successful contributing members of society and our economies.
And that's where the question comes, you know, what is quality education really when we really talk about it?
I mean, it differs from community to community. It's important to diversify the educational system. If I look at the Almajiri system that takes place in northern Nigeria, you know, I see there's a lot that needs to be done. So the Almajiri system is an ancient tradition that started out as an Islamic educational system for the youth. Families from rural areas across West Africa would send their children to go learn the Quran in parts of Nigeria rather than send them to formal schools. And this practice, that has been the practice since then. But then things have changed and the whole narrative has completely changed. Kids are not given any type of stipend when they're sent. As a result, they're forced to pretty much bang on the streets, you know, just to survive. These kids are vulnerable to drugs, trafficking, and various forms of exploitations like terrorism. But it's good to see that one community called the Magami community in Zamfara, they partnered with UNICEF and are able to integrate Quranic schools and formal education. And so the whole idea of the project is geared towards enrolling and retaining out-of-school children, and they hope that, they hope to extend this to neighboring states like Katsina, Kebbi, and Sokoto.
Right, and we are an incredibly young continent. I mean, 70% of us are under the age of 35 years old. So what's a quality education?
Well,
it's
not 70%
making sure
of us, but yes.
Right. Of me, I'll speak for myself. But a quality education means preparing our young people for a quickly evolving world.
So, but I want to take us quickly back to the package where the lady talks about, her being the only person that got married out of her peers who did not complete their secondary school education. I just want to point out that this doesn't only happen in Malawi. This happens across West Africa. As a matter of fact, it happens in East Africa as well, Somalia, Sudan, Tanzania. So because they put a lot of emphasis on marriage as opposed to having an education. But for some, it's never too late. Meet 60-year-old Somali mother, Falhad Mahmoud Ahmed. After her husband passed away 20 years ago, Falhad raised 2 daughters on her own. Her older daughter signed her up at a George Mason University. This summer, she earned a master's degree and graduated together with her younger daughter. Let's hear her story.
This journey began when I left Somalia back in 1980, and I came to the United States. And one thing my dad said to me was, when you go to the United States, you make sure you get your education. I had a high school diploma, and my dream was to fulfill that promise I made to my dad. I think today I fulfilled that promise.
Wow, that is such a beautiful story.
Oh, it just makes you smile. I mean, every now and again you can make someone's day. Every now and again someone can make our day.
She realizes the importance of education.
Right, and we talk a lot about the challenges of education. It's really good to see a success story, and we want to hear some of your challenges as well as your success stories. Catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is @VOA Our Voices.
And be sure to share our pages with your friends. Use the hashtag VOA Our Voices.
We're on WhatsApp. Our number is on your screen, so reach out to us and add your voice to this discussion.
Well, still ahead here on Our Voices, how teachers are coping in schools across the continent. We'll share our report card after the break.
On Our Voices, we're talking about the news and issues you're talking about.
Sharing stories of development and growth across Africa,
around the world, and in our lives.
Topics that inform, empower,
and change the rules.
It's time for Our Voices
with me, Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick,
and Hadiza Kiari,
and Ayan Bior,
and Orion Itangi Shaka.
Join us on Facebook at VOA Our Voices.
It's time for Our Voices.
Welcome back. This is Our Voices. Burkina Faso is facing massive internal displacement because of violence. The United Nations reports more than 100,000 people have been displaced this year in the West African nation. And as VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb reports from the capital, Ouagadougou, displacement often forces children and teachers out of the classroom.
These Burkinabe students are hard at work with their latest social studies lesson. But with each passing week in Burkina Faso, fewer classrooms like this one remain open. The reason? The threat from jihadist violence is now so severe in Burkina Faso that 150,000 children can't go to school and about 5,000 teachers can't teach in their classrooms. The laughter in this elementary school playground rings bittersweet in the ears of displaced teacher Sia Michael. He remembers the joy of his students, he says, before Islamic militants burned down his school and forced him to flee.
They often left messages saying that if they return and you're still there, your life will be in danger. In this case, what are you going to do? You have to leave. Once they burn down the school, then your life is next.
The closings have spread across the country's east and north, where jihadists from neighboring Niger and Mali have spilled over the borders. Opposed to Western education, the militants destroy some schools like Michael's. Others are closed by teachers, worried they'll be targeted next. Badina Joseph fled his village near the nation's northern border with Mali after Salafists showed up with specific demands.
They warned teachers that if we did not move or start teaching in Arabic the following day, we better leave the village. They required us to teach in a language unknown to us, so we closed the schools and left before December holidays.
Education advocates say the closings will lead to long-term repercussions for Burkina Faso's future.
Any Burkinabe must be concerned because to destroy a country, you just need to destroy education.
Officials are working to reopen some schools, but many fear children won't attend, as long as violence remains on the rise. Carla Babb, VOA News, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
Displacement due to conflict certainly hinders the progress in the education system, whether it be in the countries where the children and the teachers come from or flee to. Nonetheless, under the theme Building Bridges and Not Walls, the recently released 2019 Global Education Monitoring Report says that many sub-Saharan countries are leading the way globally in managing migration challenges, actually, particularly in places like in Uganda, where there is about 1.4 million refugees. And we know that Uganda is very receptive and integrates refugees right into the communities. So with that, they're saying that they need about 7,000 more teachers to accommodate this new influx of refugees. But, you know, it also says that there's going to need about $15 million into these teachers' salaries. So that a lot of resources is going to be needed. But they're saying that Uganda is actually the blueprint for best practices in terms of in situations like this.
Where's the money going to come from?
They actually, Uganda, it's a very good question. They're saying that Uganda is using humanitarian as well as development partners are coming together to fund these efforts. And what Uganda is doing is that it's considering both regular students and refugees together to assist in that pool of money. So they're looking at it as best practices, and I think some countries on the continent can use that same system.
And the influx of refugees is a fairly new issue for Uganda.
Right. That's pretty impressive, Ariane. I mean, it would be great if this model can actually be applied in countries that have been overwhelmed by Boko Haram. In Nigeria, at least 1,300 classrooms have been listed as either destroyed or damaged, and about 800 have been shut down. As a result, a lot of teachers had to let go of their jobs. And I don't see rebuilding appearing anytime soon. And even if it does happen, teachers are just too traumatized and even afraid to return back to school.
Yeah, I mean, forced displacement, insecurity, these are all issues that teachers are very aware of. But continent-wide, we have an issue, and that's that we don't have enough teachers. Right. UNESCO says that we're going to need at least 17 million in the next 10 years to fill that deficit. So it is a really, really huge issue. But, you know, growing up, I personally was blessed because I had a dad who was essentially my very first teacher. Our dad taught us how to read. He taught us basic mathematics. And I remember, like, we would be walking down the streets of Nairobi and he would point to a sign and say, "Can you read that?" So we always kept us on our toes. But I understand that a lot of kids just don't have that. And like looking at this huge gap, 17 million teachers, I mean, that is a lot of people.
People are turning to homeschooling, as a matter of fact.
That's right, yeah.
Well, I think in South Africa that might have to be an option for so many. You know, the country has around 440,000 teachers, teaching 12 million, maybe 12.5 million children. That's the number of children enrolled at state schools. But research by the South African Education Department has found that 10% of teachers around the country don't show up for work.
Really?
Every day.
Why?
10% out of the classroom. South Africa's Human Rights Commission visited a few schools in the eastern part, the Eastern Cape Province and the Western Cape Province, which is where I'm from, to sort of gauge what the overcrowding situation is going to be. And what they found was like close to a nightmare. There are teachers who are expected to teach classrooms as big as between 90 and 100 children at a time. Some kids are still being taught under a tree. In a country like South Africa, that's really heartbreaking. Couple that with low pay, inadequate training, you know, and just depressing work situations. No wonder teachers are demotivated. No wonder we're seeing these low pass rates. In South Africa, we like to talk about the doors of learning shall be open. But if the doors are open and inside it looks like this, what you're getting as teachers children are showing up, but the teachers aren't.
Wow. That's right, Haiti. Demotivation is definitely one of the pressing issues across the continent. So I had a chance to sit down with Professor Godson Chukwuma from Webster University. He's a co-founder of Global Institute of Commerce and Technology. Chukwuma addresses a couple of other pressing challenges that Nigeria faces. Let's hear what he had to say.
If you are a teacher and you are not provided the necessary amenities or tools, and you are not even trained to the point that you're able to deliver. You don't have benefits, no incentives. Of course, you reach out to some other place to find people say greener pasture. You have to leave the profession to go somewhere else. The government has to provide some incentives, provide some enabling environment that will make teachers be there to be able to accommodate the students regardless of their social status.
You know, hearing all the issues that Professor Chukwuma mentioned, I wonder if teaching is even a desirable profession anymore.
Well, you know, I think it's probably the same in many of our African countries. And I think on the continent, teachers who are qualified, who are well qualified, who are good at their jobs, you know, those teachers are always going to have other options.
Yeah.
Migration is always going to be an option for them.
Think salaries just have to increase,
right,
because they're just not empowered.
But
in terms of salary.
A study by Rian de Villiers from the University of Pretoria looks at why teachers are leaving South Africa. We have almost a crisis of a brain drain in the country. And he interviewed students, teaching students in their final year looking to come into the profession. And many of them said, look, we see ourselves teaching in South Africa for the first 5 years, but after that, we're going to look for greener pastures, just like the professor talked about. But they were saying that they are getting better pay offers, better working conditions in places like the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi especially, in the UK, New Zealand, and some are even looking even at the United States.
My sister taught in Dubai, and they paid for her apartment. She didn't have to pay taxes. I mean, these are the things where...
It's so bittersweet, because on the one hand, how great is it that our teachers on the continent are in such great demand? But at the end of the day, when they leave, whether it be for 2 years or for good, it's the children who lose out.
Well, it's not all doom and gloom, because Rwanda and Ghana got it right. In Ghana, in particular, if you don't send your kids to school, you can be jailed for it.
On that very optimistic note.
That's right, Haiti. After the break, we'll introduce you to a 16-year-old Burundian-American young lady making a difference in the lives of primary school students in rural province in Burundi. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Our Voices. African women in the continent and the diaspora are doing extraordinary things. And today we highlight those who are leading the charge in educating children in Africa in a segment we like to call Women to Watch.
Born in a refugee camp in Tanzania and moving to the United States with her family at the age of 5, Aisha Ndaishimiye, a Burundian-American high school student at STEM Academy in Kentucky, founded an organization called Backpack Payback, an initiative to assist students in Burundi with school supplies. She was 14 years old on her first humanitarian trip in 2016. She traveled to personally hand out 300 backpacks and more than $1,500 worth of school supply to primary school students in the rural province of Makamba. With the support of her family, friends, and teachers, Aisha is traveling once again to Burundi to hand out more backpacks, laptops, and other supplies. Aisha is a recipient of the Outstanding Youth in Philanthropy Award at the University of Kentucky in 2017.
And there's no shortage of amazing women here. We're also watching a young Mozambican woman doing inspiring work in the country's Gorongosa National Park. Larissa Souza runs a girls' education program there, broadening the horizons of girls in communities affected by the recent cyclones Idai and Kenneth.
I am Larissa Souza. I'm working at Gorongosa National Park for the program of girls' education. Our main aim is to keep girls in school, because for many reasons, as soon as girls are old enough, let's say 13, they normally are sent to get married. Having early marriages, early pregnancies, and not having the girls go to school is something that is not good. We try to explain to these girls, as well as their parents, what is the importance of them getting an education and being able to cater for themselves in the future. Educating a woman is educating a society. We put together opportunities for these girls, things that they would never be able to get. In this way, opening doors for this child. In the beginning, you would greet the girls and they would run away. They are more open now to opportunities. They want to know more of life. What is there more? They're curious. It's very interesting how some of the girls already come and say, "Oh, I want to be a doctor. I want to be this," because now they see that this is possible. So that's what makes us work harder every day.
And I had the great pleasure of meeting that young woman here in Washington recently. Well, there are so many women doing amazing work out there. If there's someone you think we should feature on the show, do let us know. Our hashtag is VOA Our Voices. We want to hear about other women going the extra mile to give children, especially girls on the continent, access to education.
Be sure to watch Our Voices on the VOA website, where you can find the world's top news stories.
And we leave you with a quote from Welsh philanthropist Ann Cotton, the founder of the Campaign for Female Education. Ms. Cotton received the 2014 World Innovation Summit for Education Prize in Doha in recognition of her career in giving learning opportunities to girls and women in sub-Saharan Africa. She used her voice to say, "The key to success for the education of young African girls is building a model that works with communities, schools, and national ministries of education to build a system of protection and support around girls, ensuring that they receive the education that is their right."
And that's it for us this week. On behalf of the Voice of America and my colleagues, thanks for tuning in Our Voices. I'm Oriani Tangishaka. Take good care.